On the day I got married to Robert, Lilith was assaulted by several men in an alley afterward. Robert held her in his arms and blamed me. Lily, you've wronged her. From then on, the scales in his heart completely tipped towards someone else. Later, when I was killed in my home and was on the verge of death, I made one last call to Robert. He hung up impatiently, saying, "Can't you be more sensible? Lilith is afraid of thunder, and I can't leave here." Reborn, I decided to do as he wished and leave sensibly. When I was reborn, Lilith was suddenly pouring a bowl of scalding hot pot soup onto my face. "Bitch, is it fun to seduce a married man?" As if she were Robert's legitimate wife. It was dinner time. And there were many people in the hot pot restaurant. Everyone looked over. So she's the mistress. But the man just called her wife. Sure enough, as long as a guy is good looking, he can have as many wives as he wants. The mistress deserves to die. Lilith curled her lips and gave me a triumphant and provocative look. It was the same in my previous life. She loved to go crazy in public and embarrass me. If I hadn't known the truth before I died, perhaps I would have endured it this time. After all, Robert and I had an unshakable responsibility for her being assaulted and turning into a mental patient. "Memly, are you okay?" Robert's gentle voice came from beside me, as if from another world. He was carefully wiping the chilly oil off my face. However, at this moment, I couldn't help but think of his countless rebukes in my previous life. "It's because of us that Lilith became like this. Can't you just bear it?" This time, I almost instinctively pushed him away. Then, I directly poured the equally scalding spicy soup in my bowl back onto Lilith's face. "Ah!" Lilith let out a scream, covered her face, and exaggerated rolled around on the ground, looking at me with eyes as if poisoned. "Does it hurt?" I actually laughed as I watched her in pain, slowly approaching her, and said with hatred almost bursting out from between my teeth, "Lilith, you know what? I've long wanted to do this." Robert quickly helped Lilith up and scolded me with a cold and serious face. "Emily, she's just a patient. What are you arguing with her about?" "Patient?" I repeated it playfully and sarcastically, and then looked at Robert quietly. I raised my hand and slapped him directly. "I've long wanted to do this to you too." There was an uproar in the store, and some even took out their phones to take pictures. I took out the marriage certificate from my bag and deliberately raised my voice so that everyone could hear. "Robert, I came here today to mention divorce to you. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau at 3 p.m. Robert looked at me in shock. I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I straightened my back and walked out of the hot pot restaurant, feeling a bit dazed. Robert, Lilith, and our orphans who grew up in the same welfare home. We could be said to have depended on each other until Robert was adopted by the Rothschild family. We lost contact. Later, Robert and I met in college and got together. At that time, Lilith, who was studying abroad, heard the news and teased, "When you get married, you must invite me to be the bridesmaid." So I never thought that she also liked Robert until the wedding day. I accidentally lost my spare ring. Lilith helped me go home to get the ring and was dragged into an alley by several drunk homeless men. When she was sent to the hospital on the verge of death, she kept calling Robert's name. For as long as she called, Robert remained silent. We canceled our honeymoon and took turns taking care of Lilith in the hospital. But whenever Lilith saw me, she would go crazy, throw things, and cry while hiding in Robert's arms. She was like a fragile rabbit, unable to withstand any more disturbances. Finally, Robert shrugged his temples and said, "Emily, we're sorry to her. She only recognizes me now. Can you stay away from her in the future?" From then on, the scales in his heart completely tipped towards someone else. As long as Lilith said a word, he would unconditionally choose Lilith over me. Every day after work he would always drive to Lilith's home first and come back in the middle of the night, sometimes even not coming home at all. What could I say? I also felt guilty, so I couldn't say anything and had no right to say anything. After the incident in the hot pot restaurant in my previous life, Robert didn't go to see Lilith for a long time. This situation lasted until my birthday. Robert promised me that he wouldn't go anywhere today and would celebrate with me. Then, Lilith called. I didn't know what happened, but I saw the anxiety in Robert's eyes getting heavier. He picked up his coat and ran outside almost instinctively. I grabbed his wrist. "Today is my birthday. You promised." Robert looked at me disappointedly. As if in a hurry. Emily, if you had experienced what Lilith has been through, you wouldn't say such light-hearted words. Unexpectedly, his words came true not long after Robert left. Several men broke through the door of my home. I immediately hid in the bedroom and called the police. Just after I called the police, those men opened the bedroom door with a key, but how could they have the key to my bedroom? There was no time to think. They pressed me to the ground and wildly tore at my clothes. In the chaos, I found an opportunity and dialed Robert's phone. I knew he was at Lilith's place and Lilith's home was very close. As long as he could come over early, but I only heard his cold and impatient voice. Can't you be more sensible? Lilith is afraid of thunder, and I can't leave here, so. It was because she was afraid of thunder. I only had time to give a bitter laugh before the gangster roughly snatched the phone and hung up. Bitch. At the last moment of my life, I told myself if I could be reborn, I must stay away from them. After my soul left my body, I actually floated to Lilith's home. I saw Lilith timidly grab Robert's arm as if grasping at a life-saving straw. Are you leaving? Robert put down his phone, touched her forehead, and said in a low voice. I'll leave after you fall asleep. A flash of panic crossed Lilith's eyes. She suddenly tugged at his shirt and kissed him on the lips. Robert pushed her away immediately. Lilith, I'm married. I said. Trace of displeasure could be detected if one listened carefully. Tears welled up in Lilith's eyes, along with a strong sense of unwillingness. If it weren't for her losing the ring, how could I have gone through that? You said you would atone for her to me. You said you'd do anything short of the last step, didn't you? Robert's expression froze. Finally, as if in compromise, he closed his eyes and let Lilith kiss him again. He even extended a hand and skillfully placed it on Lilith's waist to keep her from falling. It was as if this scene had been played out thousands of times. I watched as he gradually became aroused, a hint of desire clouding his eyes. He even uncontrollably pressed Lilith's, deepening the kiss. A violent sense of nausea churned in my stomach, and I started to retch and vomit continuously when the thunder stopped. Lilith still didn't dare to sleep alone, so Robert stayed to accompany her. He made many calls to me, but I didn't answer. And his face gradually darkened. Is Emily angry? Lilith asked. Robert's face was cold. But he said nothing. In the middle of the night, after he fell asleep, I saw Lilith get up carefully and go to the balcony to make a call. Is it done? What? There's a death? Lilith's face turned deathly pale. Didn't I tell you to just sleep with her and record a video to threaten her? You useless bunch. Forget it. I actually believed you. I asked you to just pretend to assault me, but I didn't expect you. It's over. Everything is over now. So, those gangsters were hired by Lilith. Even the so-called assault back then was a drama she staged herself after I died. Perhaps out of guilt, Lilith bought a plane ticket to flee to another place. But she was caught by the police at the airport. The one who reported her was a tall man. He seemed somehow familiar to me, but I was sure it wasn't Robert. I tried hard to make out the man's appearance, but then I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn. Not long after I left the hot pot restaurant, Robert's call came. Millie, I don't agree to the divorce. Where are you now? I was holding the phone, about to speak, when a car slowly pulled up beside me. The car window rolled down, revealing a cold-looking face. It gradually overlapped with the face of the man who called the police in my previous life. Richard? Richard motioned to me. Get in the car. Robert on the other end of the phone should have heard his voice turned cold. Emily, how could you be with Richard? I hung up the phone directly. Robert sent me several messages, basically saying that he definitely wouldn't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau today and wanted to talk to me properly, and he warned me not to get too close to Richard. I was so angry that I laughed. Richard was the old man's late-born son in the Rothschild family. He had a cold personality and was distant from the Rothschild family members. Robert was very afraid of his little uncle. In the past few years, Richard had been developing in the entertainment industry and had no interest in the family business. But this year, he suddenly quit the entertainment circle, and there was a faint sign that he was competing with Robert for the family property. Seemingly right after I got married to Robert, and he left me countless times to go to Lilith. Looking at the man in front of me, before I could ask why he was here, I heard him say, "I'll take you to the hospital." Richard's eyes fell on my face. Doesn't it hurt? I was stunned and instinctively touched my face after being reborn. I was filled with hatred, even ignoring the pain from being scalded by the hot soup. Now that Richard asked, the pain seemed to come belatedly. My face and neck were burning with pain. Then I'll have to trouble you. I opened the car door and got in since I was reborn. Taking care of my own body was the most important thing. He was being kind. And I didn't need to be overly coy when we arrived at the hospital. Richard asked the doctor to give me a full body examination. Fortunately, the hot pot soup wasn't really that hot, and I was fine. After applying the medicine, I half closed my eyes and saw Richard standing by the window on the phone. If you're busy, you can go back to the company first. Thank you for sending me to the hospital today. As far as I could remember, he rarely returned to the Rothschild family mansion, and the number of times we met was almost zero. I was actually quite surprised by his sudden kindness this time. It's okay. He hung up the phone then. Out of the blue, he asked, "Are you going to divorce Robert?" I was stunned. It seemed he had seen what happened in the hot pot restaurant. I nodded. "I'll find a lawyer tomorrow." He looked at me quietly and didn't say anything more. I suddenly felt a bit uncomfortable under his gaze. "I'm a bit thirsty." After I said this, I realized I was actually asking this decisive and unsmiling man to get me some water. He glanced at me and actually went to do it. I was standing at the hospital entrance, filled with emotions just then. I happened to see Robert running over in a hurry, carrying Lilith in his arms. "Doctor." The moment our eyes met, Robert froze. I turned around expressionlessly. After waiting in the ward for a while, Richard still hadn't come back. Just as I was about to send him a message, there was a noise at the door. "Emily." It was Robert. "This afternoon, you splashed Lilith's face with hot soup in the hot pot restaurant. She thought she was going to be disfigured, got stimulated, had a relapse, rushed into the kitchen and cut her wrist with a kitchen knife. Now she's having a massive hemorrhage, but the hospital blood bank is short. You have the same blood type as her. Can you help her?" I looked at Robert, his eyes full of anxiety, and just said inferently, "Her life or death has nothing to do with me. Can't you see? I'm also injured." "Are you still making trouble?" Robert strode over, grabbed my wrist, and his voice was unrefusable. "Come with me to donate blood." I also had a wound on my wrist just after applying the medicine. When he suddenly pulled it, a sharp pain made me gasp. But he didn't notice at all. "Robert, you have no right to force me to do things I don't want to do." Robert's face darkened. "Mealy, do I really have to spell it out for you? If you had taken good care of the ring back then, how could Lilith have had an accident? And why would I need to take care of her, if you hadn't gone crazy this afternoon? How could Lilith have cut her wrist? People should be responsible for their own mistakes." Robert looked at me coldly. So in his heart, I had always been the one to blame. I tried hard to suppress the churning irritability in my heart and said sarcastically, "Robert, you don't need to make your infatuation with someone else sound so noble. Have you forgotten that it was Lilith who splashed me first? It was her who went crazy, not me. Lilith is afraid of being disfigured. And I deserve to be disfigured. Besides, I have a heart condition. Donating blood could very likely endanger my life. Of course, you, being so forgetful, must have forgotten that, right? Your heart has completely tilted towards her. What's the point of deceiving yourself?" Robert stood there, stunned, his face turning pale. He wanted to argue but couldn't. "Robert, if I said that Lilith's so-called assault was just a self-directed play, would you believe me? Think about it carefully. Why did she insist on not calling the police at that time?" "That's enough." Robert interrupted me roughly. "Emily, you don't need to come up with such a ridiculous excuse to avoid responsibility. Believe it or not, it's up to you." I shook him off violently, took out my phone and called the police, saying that someone was forcing me to donate blood. I ignored Robert's dark face. I calmly told the police the address of the hospital, then looked up at the man I had loved for so many years. "Robert, I'm serious about divorce. If you don't agree, I'll file a lawsuit." A nurse ran over to tell Robert that a spare blood bag had been found before he left. He left a sentence, "Emily, and I was wrong today, but I really only regard Lilith as a sister. The person I love has always been you. in other words. He would never agree to a divorce when Richard came in. Robert had just left. There was no hot water there. So I went downstairs to the hospital and bought some wontons and porridge. He was explaining to me why he had been gone for so long. Naturally, I didn't mind. He probably noticed my uneasiness and said he was going back to the company watching him finally leave. I let out a sigh of relief then I received a WeChat message. Richard sent me a business card. A lawyer who specializes in divorce cases. The winning rate is quite good. He has never lost a case. Me? Still, hada lal sigh. I politely thanked him. Thank you, uncle. After a long silence, he sent a message. Since you've decided to divorce, you don't need to call me uncle like he does. During the period when I was preparing to file for divorce, I stayed in the hospital to recover from my injuries. Robert came to see me many times. His tone was soft and his attitude was sincere. He promised to send Lilith abroad for treatment and would no longer contact her. Lilith suddenly sent me a message. Do you think you've won? I'm telling you, he got drunk last night and we had sex. Oh, maybe I already have his child in my belly. Then she deleted it in a second. I looked at the screen for a few seconds and replied. Remember to take precautions in the future. If you give birth to a child with the same brain atrophy as you, that would really be your sin. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Robert came to me again, saying that he was willing to discuss the divorce with me, but there was one condition: to attend his mother's birthday party. Mom has always liked you. She's not in good health recently and wants to see you. After the party, we'll talk. I agreed. Mrs. Rothschild's party was very lively. The relatives of the collateral branches of the family all came. Emily is getting more and more beautiful. I wish my family had such a virtuous daughter-in-law. Amid the compliments from the relatives, I could tell that Robert didn't seem to have told the family about our plan to divorce. Isn't that Richard? He never participates in such gatherings. Why is he here today? Yeah, he and Robert have always been at odds. Is he here to cause trouble for him today? How else could he cause trouble? Could he steal his wife? Just as I took a sip of wine, I saw Richard surrounded by people like a star. He was tall and long-legged, standing out in the crowd. When his eyes swept over me, there was no ripple. I nodded to him politely, but he just stared at me faintly, with an expression that showed neither joy nor anger, and then coldly shifted his gaze. What a strange person. What was he angry about? Emily. A voice sounded in my ear. Robert was neatly dressed, with a gentle smile on his handsome face. He reached out his hand to me. Mom is waiting for you in the hall. Let us go. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly flashed and skillfully hooked his arm. Robert, I've been looking for you for so long. It was Lilith. I was a bit surprised that Robert had brought her. Did it mean that the Rothschild family also recognized her identity? Robert's smile disappeared. He quickly pulled Lilith's hand away and explained to me with a hint of unease. Emily, don't misunderstand. I just smiled. Robert, we're about to get divorced. It's your freedom to bring whoever you want to the family dinner. Lilith's unhappiness was about to show on her face. I changed the topic. But bringing an idiot here really gave me a big surprise. Lilith's face turned livid. She stared at me. Her eyes filled with hatred. Her eyes swept over the red wine glass in my hand, and after a moment, she smiled strangely. Sister Emily, have a good time today. My intuition told me that she was up to something, so after exchanging greetings with Mrs. Rothschild, I planned to find an excuse and leave as soon as possible. Most likely, Robert wasn't going to talk to me about divorce today. He just wanted to trick me into coming to his mother's birthday. When I went to the restroom, a strange feeling of heat came over me, and then I realized what Lilith had done. My legs went weak, and I stumbled, holding onto the wall in a daze. A hand covered my mouth, and then I lost consciousness. I woke up in a strange room. My mouth was taped shut, and my hands and feet were tied. I could faintly hear voices talking. I drugged her. You guys sleep with her later and make sure to record a video. Remember, I'll bring everyone here to catch her in the act. Leave more marks on her body. I tried hard to open my eyes. At the door, Lilith was talking to several men. Their faces were clearly those of the men who killed me in my previous life and broke into my house. This should have happened a few years later. Why was it happening so much earlier? And this was the Rothschild's place. Was Lilith crazy? Lilith left, but the men seemed to be arguing about something. And there were faint footsteps outside the door. Seizing the opportunity, I picked up an ashtray with both hands and smashed it hard towards the door. Bang! The dull sound of hitting the door made the footsteps stop hesitantly. What a fucking bitch. This act obviously enraged the men. They came over, cursing just like in my previous life before they could do anything. The door was kicked open in a blur. I seemed to see Richard's angry face. Richard. When I opened my eyes again, the restraints on my body were all. Richard was the only one left in the room. I tried to stand up, but my legs gave way, and I fell forward. Instead of the expected pain, I fell into a warm embrace. I grabbed his collar to support myself. I clearly saw his Adam's apple move. I tried my best to calm down and finish speaking. Take me to the bathroom. Richard stared at me for a long time as if thinking about something. Then he quickly pushed me into the bathroom. Cold water poured down from above my head, barely suppressing the heat in my body. Are you okay? Richard asked outside the door. I opened the bathroom door, indicating that I felt a little better, but still a bit embarrassed. The atmosphere was a bit subtly awkward. Richard asked, as if casually, did you come to the party today planning to forgive Robert? I directly denied it. How could I? It's impossible between him and me. Then I told him what had happened. I don't know if it was an illusion, but I noticed that he seemed to show a trace of barely perceptible pleasure. Suddenly, there was a sound of voices outside the door. And the footsteps were dense. I just saw Emily enter this room with a man. I should have seen it right. The voices were getting closer. In a panic, without thinking much, I pushed Richard into the bathroom. The door was pushed open with a bang. The first one to rush in was Robert. Behind him, Lilith led almost all the guests, and I, with a flushed face, still had water droplets on my clothes. There were also marks left from the fight with those men just now. It was hard not to make people think. Everyone had an incredulous, gossip-loving expression and whispered, "My God, what's going on?" No one would believe nothing happened. The so-called good daughter-in-law of the Rothschild family is actually a slut. Someone, not satisfied with the chaos, whistled at Robert. What a huge cuckold. Robert seemed extremely angry. His eyes were tightly fixed on the red marks on my neck and wrists. Without asking for an explanation, the next second, a slap landed heavily on my face, hitting me directly to the ground. Robert's cold and jealous voice almost came out from between his teeth. Tell me, who the hell is that bastard? In an instant, I quickly stood up and slapped him back hard. With the anger of 2 lifetimes, I almost used all my strength and gave Robert 3 slaps in total. My sharp nails scratched his skin, leaving several bright red blood marks. She touched his face, and the look in his eyes when he stared at me was a mixture of pain and anger. He seemed to be able to say only these words. Who is it? At the same time, over by the bathroom, the door was suddenly pulled open in full view of everyone. Richard walked out of the bathroom, with a sneer on his face. Robert, hitting a woman. You're really something. His voice was tinged with indescribable anger. I didn't expect Richard to come out now and was stunned on the spot. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. And then there were gasps all around, followed by an uproar. Robert's eyes were blood red, and his expression was so ferocious that he seemed ready to kill. Richard, you seduced my wife. He swung his fist and smashed it hard towards Richard's face, but Richard sidestepped and he missed, falling to the ground in a sorry state. Richard looked down at him. After all these years, you still haven't improved at all. Robert's eyes became even redder, and he roared, I'm going to kill you. He suddenly stood up and rushed over again. Both of them were tall, but Richard was a little taller than Robert and had a more solid build. So the outcome was obvious. Richard easily dodged and then punched Robert hard in the face. This punch is to teach you to respect women. While Robert was still reacting, Richard grabbed his collar and punched him a few more times, each punch landing solidly. This punch is to tell you to be loyal to your marriage. This punch is for you wrongly accusing an elder without knowing the facts. The scene was dead silent. No one dared to step forward to stop the fight. It was just Robert being attacked unilaterally. After a while, Richard finally stopped. He rubbed his wrist and looked up to meet my eyes. It seemed like he was asking, "Do you feel better now?" I couldn't tell what I was feeling. "Robert, how are you?" Only then did Lilith rush to Robert's side. He was beaten black and blue, with blood still dripping from the corner of his mouth, but Robert didn't look at her. He just stared fixedly at Richard. His eyes filled with turbulent emotions. Finally, his eyes welled up with tears. "If you want the company, I can give it to you. Why did you have to take away my Emily?" Looking at his self-proclaimed affectionate appearance, I felt no touch at all. And even a bit disgusted. Richard looked at him coldly. "Today is my sister-in-law, your mother's birthday party. Do you think I would mess around with your wife at this time? Has your brain been eaten by the woman next to you?" As soon as these words were spoken, not only was Robert stunned, but Lilith's face beside him also turned extremely ugly. Richard sneered, his gaze sweeping over everyone one by one. "I passed by this room just now and saw several men dressed as waiters trying to misbehave with Miss Sue. When they saw someone noticed, they fled in a hurry without having time to do anything. Anyone with eyes can see the signs of a fight in the room, notice the tape and ropes on the ground, and see the red marks from the bindings on Miss Sue's hands and feet. People who seemed oblivious. If you really don't have eyes, you should at least have ears." Richard looked at me, his voice firm. "Miss Sue, don't you have evidence?" I was stunned for a moment but quickly understood the meaning behind his words. I took out a voice recorder from my pocket. In fact, it wasn't hard to guess. Before going to the bathroom, to prevent it from getting wet, I took out the voice recorder, and Richard must have seen it. Yes, just in case. From the moment I agreed to come to the party, I carried the voice recorder with me. When Lilith was conspiring with those men to frame me, I pressed the record button. Now it really came in handy. The moment Lilith saw the voice recorder, her face turned deathly pale. She rushed over to snatch it. But Robert grabbed her arm tightly. "What are you so nervous about?" I watched her panicked expression with satisfaction and then pressed the play button. The next second, Lilith's scold voice came clearly from the voice recorder. "I drugged her. You guys sleep with her later and make sure to record a video, remember? I'll bring everyone here to catch her in the act. Leave more marks on her body to make her look like a slut." The whole room was deathly silent. Lilith slumped to the ground and tentatively reached out to grab Robert's hand. "Robert." Robert slapped her hard in the face, and every finger was trembling. "Yes, we were sorry to you for what happened back then. But do you hate Emily so much that you wanted to find someone to defile her? I tried my best to compensate you. What else do you want?" He almost roared these words. "Because I want you to love me the way you love Emily." Lilith's face was as pale as paper, and her expression seemed to be in a frenzy. "Do you think I don't know that every time you kiss me, you're thinking of her? I'm not willing, Robert. Why, even though we grew up together, you fell in love with her." "What's wrong with me? What makes me inferior to her?" The whole place erupted in an instant. "Did I hear wrong just now? Isn't this just an affair?" I suddenly felt a bit grateful that Lilith didn't have a very smart mind. I said, "I came to this party today because Robert promised me before that he was willing to negotiate a divorce with me. The reason we've come to this point of divorce is that he had an affair with Lilith. But I didn't expect that Lilith, in order to make Robert and me divorce as soon as possible, would drug and frame me. If it weren't for Richard's help, I might really have been ruined by her." I appropriately lowered my eyelids and gave a bitter smile. Contemptuous, mocking, and contemptuous glances then surged towards Lilith like a tide. A mistress is a mistress. Her mind is so vicious. To be honest, although Richard is only 3 years older than Robert, he's calm, reliable, and he's the old man's biological son. He seems more suitable to inherit the Rothschild group. Indeed, has anyone called the police? This woman really disgusts me if she stays here any longer. What about those men? We can't let them get away. Just as I was about to speak, Richard's deep voice sounded behind me. "I called the police just now, and those people have been caught." I looked up at him. Richard gave me a reassuring muck. "Those people damaged the corridor surveillance in advance, thinking that they could get away by climbing over the rockery wall, but they didn't know that the Rothschild family had been burglarized some time ago, so there's also a surveillance camera outside the wall. The surveillance camera outside the wall captured their license plate number. I just received the news that the police have caught them. When Lilith heard this news, she became even more excited than before and fainted directly. When she woke up, the police had also arrived according to the confessions of those men. They identified Lilith as the mastermind of this premeditated rape case. The police also got another thing out of them, that Lilith's so-called assault backed, then was also self-directed and self-performed. When being taken away by the police, Lilith shouted hysterically, "I'm also a victim. I hired them back then, but they went back on their word and really assaulted me. That's why I hate Emily. If it weren't for her, how could I have gone through all this? I vowed to take revenge on her and make her taste the pain I've experienced. Robert, only you can save me. I love you so much. Everything I did was for you." The moment he knew the truth, Robert was struck like by lightning. And he stood there stunned. After a long time, he slowly and stiffly turned to look at me. "Emily." I looked at his pale face calmly, watching the pain and helplessness gradually welling up in his eyes. He was crying as if countless words were stuck in his throat and couldn't come out. Finally, with his blood-red eyes, they turned into endless regret. I suddenly thought of something that happened in the orphanage on my 8th birthday. I really wanted to have a bottle of cola at that time. Robert suddenly disappeared. The dean searched for a long time, but couldn't find him and almost called the police. When he finally came back, he was covered in injuries. He took off his coat and handed me the cold cola he had been holding in his arms, grinning and saying happy birthday to me. But then he gasped in pain because of the wound on his lip. Later I learned that he had competed in a wrestling match with some kids outside, and the prize was a bottle of cola on that day. I also received a second gift. Even year old Lilith, with a runny nose, smashed her bunny piggy bank and used the pocket money she had saved for a long time to buy me a 2-inch strawberry-flavored small cake. Because of that cake, in the second year after Robert was adopted and left, another wealthy family came to the orphanage. When the dean asked me if I wanted to go with them, I looked at Lilith beside me, who was timid yet faintly expectant, and gently shook my head. So, Lilith left with them, and I stayed in the welfare home until I was 18. Time has passed, and things have changed. Robert, who used to get bruised and battered to give me a bottle of cola, Lilith, who used to spend all her pocket money on my birthday gift, and I, who gave up the hard-won adoption opportunity. None of us are the same as we were at the beginning. Finally, I said to Robert, "Perhaps at the beginning, you were trying to compensate Lilith, but later the feelings you developed for her were real. You don't need to deny it, nor is there any need to. Those moments when you abandoned me at will, those sleepless nights, are all proof. You've changed your heart. If we force ourselves to stay together, it will only make me feel disgusted with the memories of the past. Robert, let's set each other free." Robert didn't give in, and I eventually took the path of filing for divorce. Fortunately, the lawyer Chen introduced by Richard was really reliable, and I became the client of his 106th successful divorce lawsuit. I used part of it to register a company, recruited people, and was busy for nearly several months. 3 months after the divorce, I finally found some free time to invite Richard and lawyer Chen to dinner in the evening. I saw Richard's car at the company entrance. "Congratulations on your new life," he smiled. "Since lawyer Chen and Richard are friends, during the period of the lawsuit, the three of us often had dinner together. Over time, I got to know a bit about Richard's true personality. He seems cold, but in fact, he is a man of great taste and cultivation, and he has his own opinions and principles on many things. He seldom smiles, but when he does, it can make people lose their senses, just like now." I was stunned for a short while, and then I found myself sitting in the passenger seat of Richard's car, looking at his angular side profile. My brain started working again, and I felt a bit embarrassed. "Did you say that lawyer Chen won't have dinner with us today?" "Yes, he has, going on a blind date." "Oh?" My gossipy spirit was ignited. "He's a young and talented man with a successful career. Does he still need to go on a blind date?" Richard rested one hand on the steering wheel and looked at me sideways with a half smile. "Are you very satisfied with him?" I subconsciously followed his words. "Lawyer Chen is good looking. Any girl would be attracted to him." "What about me?" His eyes were as deep as a whirlpool, and I couldn't see the emotions in them. My heart skipped a beat for some reason, and I even stuttered. What? Richard, however, withdrew his gaze and unbuttoned 2 buttons of his shirt collar with one hand, revealing a line of elegant luster at the collarbone. It's nothing. After dinner, Richard and I walked by the river. Little stars spread a series of deep and shallow glows on the water surface. The breeze was gentle, and the small boats were swaying. Do you want to take a boat? Richard suddenly asked. I hadn't taken a boat for a long time, so I said yes, but the moment the 2 of us got on the boat, I felt that the atmosphere was a bit subtle. I couldn't tell exactly where it was subtle, but it was subtle everywhere. Richard sat opposite me, his 2 eye-catching long legs casually crossed, sitting in a lazy, clean, and elegant posture. Even in such an environment, he looked like a nobleman walking out of a European medieval mural. I suddenly remembered that when he hadn't quit the entertainment industry, he was once rated by the media as the dream lover that girls most want to marry. To break the awkward atmosphere, I mentioned this to Richard and said with a smile, at that time I was bored and scrolling through Weibo. Out of consideration that we're relatives, I voted for you. Later, a zombie account reposted my Weibo, which gave me a scare. Zombie account. Richard's tone was inexplicably a bit lower. Yes. Suddenly one day that account followed me. It had no avatar, no updates, and no profile information. It was like every Weibo I posted. What else could it be but a zombie account? But I was really surprised when it reposted the Weibo saying that you were the dream lover that girls most want to marry. Because that was the only Weibo it posted. If I wasn't sure it was a zombie account, I would have thought he had a crush on me. Richard suddenly fell silent. I also became restless, as if I had a premonition that something was about to happen. The red lantern on the shore looks nice. I'm going to take a picture of it. I picked up my phone and stood up abruptly, trying to change the topic unexpectedly. I lost my balance before I could even be surprised. My body had fallen forward and landed in a cool embrace. I was sitting on Richard's lap, his arm encircling my waist from behind, and my hand uncontrollably landed on his chest. It rose and fell, and I could seemingly feel his heart beating violently. Our breaths stilled at this moment. I stared at him with wide eyes. In the dim and ambiguous light, his long eyebrows and straight nose, and his deep-set eyes looked at me. The warm and humid breath he exhaled faintly fell on my nose. He stared into my eyes and said word by word, Emily, that was my alternate account. I've liked you for many years. I was stunned. Even after Richard sent me home and drove away, I was still a bit dazed. In fact, I wasn't completely unaware. Bits and pieces of my interactions with Richard played back in my mind like a fleeting scene that day when I came out of the hot pot restaurant. I coincidentally met him. He took me to the hospital. Later, he saved me from those men in time, taught Robert a lesson on my behalf, accompanied me through the divorce lawsuit, and even recorded Lilith in my previous life. There were signs everywhere. But why? Besides confusion and daze, my heart seemed to be pounding a little too. I've liked you for many years. Richard's confession with a hint of tremor rang in my ears again just now. When he saw me just staring at him blankly, he suddenly smiled and said, It's okay. I can wait. I suddenly felt my face getting a bit hot. A familiar yet strange voice came from behind me. I turned around and Sir Albert standing in the moonlight, looking at me silently. His face was pale, with faint dark circles under his eyes. His cheeks were much thinner, and his figure was like a withered branch in autumn. Just now. Did he send you back? Are you together? It was obvious who he was. I looked at him coldly. Is it any of your business? Robert's face turned as white as paper. He lowered his head sadly and listlessly. Recently, I keep having the same dream every night. I dream that in the hot pot restaurant, you didn't pour the soup back but endured it later. Lilith became more and more insatiable, and I became more and more absurd. On your birthday, I left you to take care of Lilith, who was afraid of thunder. In the middle of the night, those men hired by Lilith. Robert seemed unable to continue. He looked up at me as if mustering up courage. His voice dangled, nervous, and slightly trembling with self-doubt. Is it true? I didn't answer. I clenched my fist at my sides and just looked at him calmly. It was as if the kite string snapped, and his eyes instantly turned red. So, it's true. Emily, every time you encounter something painful, you clench your fist so tightly that your nails dig deep into your flesh. No matter how I tried to correct you, you still did it. So, Emily, it's true. What happened in the previous life? So that's why you wanted to divorce me this time. You just wanted to save yourself. He raised his hand to cover his eyes, but tears still trickled out from between his fingers. What did I do then? I went to Lilith when you needed my company the most. I hung up on you when you asked me for help. How sad and desperate you must have been at that time. Even this time, Edwin, this time. I persuaded you to endure it, forced you to donate blood to Lilith, didn't believe you, and slapped you without asking why. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I listened to his confession with a pale face and in silence. Whether you believe it or not, I've always loved you. I've never liked Lilith. It was always just guilt and responsibility towards her. And now it's only hatred and disgust. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He took several deep breaths before he could continue speaking intermittently. I know you'll never forgive me in this lifetime. I can't forgive myself either. I'll atone for my sins in my own way. Have you said enough? I looked at him expressionlessly. If you've said enough, leave. Don't appear in front of me again in the future. I don't want to see you for the rest of my life. Robert looked at me silently for another moment, then forced a smile that was uglier than a cry. Okay, before leaving, he told me one last thing. When I first came to the Rothschild family, I almost got Richard kidnapped. He was missing for 3 days and 3 nights, and was only found on the 4th day. So he's always hated me. I'm not sure if his approaching you and taking you away is to get revenge on me. Soon, Robert voluntarily gave up his inheritance rights in the Rothschild family and suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. And Lilith was diagnosed as pregnant in prison. She was released on bail and was taken back to the Rothschild family by Mrs. Rothschild. The first night Lilith was taken back to the Rothschild family, Robert came back in the middle of the night. He stabbed a fruit knife into Lilith's stomach while she was asleep. It was a double death. He's now been arrested by the police. Richard told me this. And I couldn't help but sigh for a while. Do you feel sorry for her? I shook my head. Whether in the previous life or this life, Lilith wanted to kill me. Her current end is nothing but what she deserved. If I pity her, then who'll pity me in my previous life? Richard paused. What about Robert? I raised my eyebrows, stared at him for a while until he slightly averted his gaze. Then said calmly, I don't have any feelings for him anymore. Richard's frown relaxed. Oh. During this period, Richard and I were in a relationship that was more than friends but less than lovers. He picked me up from work every day, and we had dinner together. On weekends, we would travel together. He also used his connections in the entertainment industry to get me the VIP tickets for my favorite singer's concert, the kind with an interaction session. The song for the interaction was Like You. That was the first time I knew that Richard could sing. His voice was deep and magnetic, like a lover's whisper, tugging at my heartstring one after another. As for Robert's speculation, of course I wouldn't rashly doubt Richard's motives for being nice to me if he really wanted to take revenge on Robert. Why did he stay by my side silently in my previous life, and only dared to show his true feelings in front of me this life when he heard that I was going to divorce? Moreover, I clearly remember that in my previous life, when Richard saw Lilith finally caught, the tears on his face were real. And the sadness and sorrow in his eyes were real. However, Richard must have other secrets hidden from me since he doesn't want to talk about them now. I won't force him. I thought it would take a long time to find out this secret. But unexpectedly, the opportunity came soon. One day, when we went hiking, I was so tired that I crouched on the ground and said I couldn't walk anymore. Richard smiled, rubbed my hair and then bent down. I'll carry you. I put my arms around his neck. Then I won't be polite. After getting on his back, Richard picked up the bag and carried me carefully on the mountain path. His back was straight and strong, and I could smell the faint fragrance on him. It was very pleasant and gently surrounded me. Somehow, I felt this scene was a bit familiar, as if it had existed in my memory. Actually, you carried me like this once before, Richard said suddenly. Tell me more. I pricked up my ears. At that time, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. My brother and sister-in-law had been childless for years, so they went to the welfare home and adopted a child around my age. That is, Robert. When he first came, he was nervous and restless. Always thinking about going back to the welfare home, saying he was looking for someone named Emily. My sister-in-law asked me to take him to school, but he ran away halfway. Everyone thought I went missing on the way to look for him that day when I was kidnapped. I thought for a while and then told him. Robert said you approached me to take revenge on him. Richard paused and then laughed. He really knows how to make himself look good, Dad. I was always a well-behaved and obedient child in their eyes. Maybe the more I was restrained, the more I wanted to be free. After I confirmed that he had returned to the welfare home, I went to an internet CIF for the first time. Playing games? I was surprised. Richard nodded with tandem that after finding that playing games wasn't as interesting as I thought. I left. I was kidnapped when I passed by the alley entrance. They took me to a house on the mountain. A little girl brought me food. She had a small face and slightly naturally curly hair. Distant memories came back to my mind through time. I asked tentatively, were you very dark at that time? Richard couldn't help laughing. At that time? They smeared several layers of pot ashes on me to cover my identity. I was both surprised and suddenly realized. At that time, the grandma on the mountain often came to the welfare home to see me. During that period, she was ill. So I temporarily moved there to take care of her, but I knew she had a son who was addicted to gambling. Most likely, he wanted to kidnap Richard to get the ransom. But I really couldn't remember the exact situation clearly. What happened later? Later, Richard suddenly smiled. I told you it was my birthday that day and asked if you could take me down the mountain, and I would treat you to a cake. You happily agreed and asked if you could have a strawberry-flavored one. You also asked if you could get a bottle of cola as a bonus. I was stunned and then smiled too. I was injured in the leg by them at that time and couldn't go down the mountain alone. You helped me to the halfway up the mountain and then carried me down. To be honest, I'd never seen a girl work so hard for a cake and a cola. Your forehead was sweating. Your legs were bending, and your whole body was shaking from exhaustion. But you still gritted your teeth and persisted until you finally carried me down the mountain. As he spoke, Richard paused, and his voice suddenly became a bit apologetic. After going down the mountain, I wanted to keep my promise and buy the cake. But then I found those people chasing after us, so I had to hide. I saw them angrily burn your arm with a cigarette, but it must have hurt a lot. But you didn't make a sound. I unconsciously looked at my exposed arms. There was indeed a very light scar on the inner side of my arm. After that, I always wanted to find you in order to make you notice me. I gave up my inheritance rights in the Rothschild family and chose to enter the entertainment industry. I worked hard step by step and finally reached the highest and most prominent position. For so many years, it seemed that finding you had become my life goal. Only by achieving it could my life be complete. But when we met again, it was at your wedding with Robert that was the first time I felt heartbroken. And at that moment, I realized that my obsession with you had turned into liking and love. But I could only choose to stay away and watch you silently later. When Robert was unfaithful to your marriage, I was very angry but powerless. I could only quit the entertainment industry and compete with him for the family property to remind him not to give me a chance to catch him, hoping he could treat you better. And then, you took the initiative to propose divorce to him. Emily, although it might seem immoral, I was quite happy. When saying this, Richard's voice was low and his tone was filled with a light-hearted smile. It was obvious that he was extremely happy. My face gradually turned red, and in my heart, I finally made the decision I had been hesitating about. Reborn. I just want to live my own life well. If someone likes me sincerely, passionately and consistently, and I like him too, then why not give it a try? Finally, we reached the foot of the mountain. Richard said, Emily, I still owe you a strawberry cake and a bottle of cola. I gently leaned my head on his back and said in a soft voice that he could hear clearly, then you're punished to treat me to strawberry cakes and cola for a lifetime.